Now, the real guys, they prove out to be real guys, right? They're not carnales unless carnales say they're carnales. Believe me, get around the right carnales and he will be eliminated. They'll clean house. When they clean house, that means anybody with anything questionable is going to get nailed. I despised this guy. I despised him. Cops would actually bet on who was going to win the fight. I brought down a Titan. He knew it was coming. In fact, he PC'd up right there. My name is Rene Enriquez, and you are watching Uncensored. I'm going to give you the who's who of the Mexican Mafia. Yep, we got it, folks. We got every living and deceased member there is, or was, because most of these guys are deceased. The first one we have is Alex Peewee Aguirre. Alex Peewee Aguirre is part of the Aguirre dynasty. A lot has been said about him. A lot of content has been created on him. I knew Alex personally. Peewee was a good guy, right? And still is a good guy. I never had a beef with him. We always got along. He was kind of quiet, little guy. They call him Peewee for a reason. He's a little guy, but he's a gangster. He's a through and through gangster. In fact, the only time I did time with him was when we ended up in Corcoran together. We got transferred from me, Tati, and I believe it was Chuco. We ended up in Corcoran together. I was transferred from Palm Hall, and I ended up in the same yard with him. Me, Tati, and it was just me, Tati, and Peewee. I was going to parole in like 3 weeks. I was doing a violation, and we were there. And really cool dude. We played handball. We talked. In fact, there was a norteño on our yard, like a righteous norteño guy, right? And I remember at that time, we weren't beeping with norteños. It was NF that we were beeping with. And I remember me, Tati, and Pee Wee spoke, and we called this norteño over because we could tell he was nervous, right? And we told him straight out, I said, we're Mexican Mafia, bro. We don't have a beef with you. And Pee Wee told us, like, look, you're welcome to come to the yard. We're not going to do anything to you. Don't do anything stupid. Because then we're going to try to hurt you. And the guy was cool. I forgot his name. And what hood he was from. But he functioned on the yard with us. And that was kind of a cool experience, right? Because that was at a period in our careers where, this whole Sureño Norteño thing had not erupted yet. It just started in Corcoran. They were doing the fights there, right? They would put people on yards where they were outnumbered just so they can get hurt. And that's what I believe that they did to this guy in our yard. They would do it to Sureños as well, throw them on BGF yards and Crip yards or NF yards, and it would happen, right? In fact, Corcoran got investigated. There was a federal investigation over multiple people getting shot and killed behind cops setting up these chicken fights, right? Cops would actually bet on who was going to win the fight. So that was my experience with Peewee Aguirre. And you saw him in the Hotel series opposing Moroshai. He's a prominent figure in the organization. He was indicted in 1995 in the United States versus Peewee Aguirre, a first RICO indictment against the Mexican Mafia. So that's Peewee. He happens to be our first person on the list because it was set up in alphabetical order. I'm taking this straight from my book, The Mexican Mafia Encyclopedia, because many of you guys can't afford to buy it, right? The publisher had it priced out, and I told you we got some reserved copies of the Mexican Mafia Encyclopedia second edition that are very exclusive, and we're going to figure out a way to get them to you guys in a contest. So until that time, I'll be giving you bits and pieces of the book. And I thought the most interesting part of it was the index in the book, which is a picture and name of every Mexican Mafia member. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to run through that list of individuals. And this is going to be multi-episodes. We cannot do this in one pop, folks. We just cannot. There's no possible way unless you're going to watch a 5-hour video. So I'm thinking we're going to have at least 10 episodes on the who's who of the mob. I've seen a lot of content creators create lists of carnales, and they go through these lists of people that have been dubbed Mexican Mafia members by a number of different agencies, and 9 times out of 10, they're wrong. And 9 times out of 10, they're wrong. And I don't care if CDC validates them, the FBI validates them, I don't care who validates them, right? They're not carnales unless carnales say they're carnales. One channel in particular does this on a frequent basis and does a disclaimer. Well, this is what the CDC says, so this is what I'm saying. So I don't do that, right? One of my standards for validation is that other people have to validate them, right? And not cops. It has to be like the folks themselves, right? And that always proves itself to be true. Like you'll hear about a guy being made or a guy being put on the shelf, and they become validated through California Administrative Code 3378, critical case factors. That's the validation process for STGs in the California Department of Corrections. And literally anybody can be validated. In fact, During my debrief, they would bring me lists of people. Is this guy a member? Is this guy a member? I'd say no. I'd say, well, we haven't validated as a member. I say, he's not a member. In fact, he's not even a camarada. It's that simple. And I used to hear guys say all the time, I'm validated. I'm on a 180. I'm on a level 4. That don't mean squat. Anybody can get validated. Now, the real guys, they prove out to be real guys, right? And there's no better form of validation than the Mexican Mafia itself, because it will validate its own guys. You'll see kites that say so and so got married or congratulate so and so. And look, there's a number of pieces of validation evidence that are generated through members so that you can be sure that they are carnales. There are some people that I heard were carnales now, and I won't even say they are because I'm not certain. I have not heard carnales say that they are. And until I do, probably won't say they are. So we're going to do a pictorial inventory of the Mexican Mafia. And I hope you like it, folks, because I'm going to give you the anecdotes of these individuals as I know them, right? Some of these guys, they were way before my time, and I never got a chance to meet them because they're founders. A lot of them are founders, and a lot of them are deceased, but some of them I did know. And those that I did and had interaction with, I'll give you those stories as we go along. So I think this is going to be a pretty interesting series we're going to run here. Let's continue on. The next one is David O.C. Aguirre. I vaguely remember Ramon Mendoza, Mundo Mendoza, mentioning this individual as having flipped in Folsom. Could be mistaken. I did not know this individual. He was a made member. Then there's George Mangas Aguirre. I heard a lot about this guy Mangas. When I first got in, I had never met the guy, but that's George Mangas Aguirre. He looks good in a shirt and tie. He does. And the next person is Richard Psycho Aguirre. That's the cousin to the first individual we spoke of, Peewee Aguirre. I knew Richard personally, and I just did an episode that mentioned him and his failure to eliminate Chino from Garrity when he had the opportunity after Chino called him a rat. Look, Richard Aguirre was an easygoing guy. I liked him. I'm certain the feeling's not mutual now. Dude suffered from OCD, obsessive compulsive behavior disorder. He had this way out thing where he wiped everything down, had everything organized in his cell, and he even had his cellies do it. And I remember it was Pino from Winmas. Yeah. It was his celly at Pelican Bay, and it was hilarious. I even asked Marcos. I told him, I says, "Hey, bro, that guy's got OCD, and he's got you doing it." And Marcos looked at me and smiled and says, "Yep, and I'm a better man for it." It was hilarious, right? So Psycho would suck everybody into that, right? But he was a good guy. Obviously, still a Mexican Mafia member, still doing his thing, and God bless him. God bless anybody who's, still doing their thing and they're active. If that's your choice, live your life, bro. I'm not trying to, knock you or talk down on anybody. And that's the truth. I'm just not trying, unless I don't like you. All right, the next guy is Raymond Bevito Alvarez. The next guy is Raymond Bevito Alvarez. I despise this guy. I despised him. This is the guy that made my life hard in Folsom. I had just got into the mob. I was in like 6 months, right? Just got made. And this was an arrogant prick. This is Bevito from Winmas. And he took over the mafia in Folsom, him and Kilroy Roybal. And they created this politicking elite group of individuals. And Wino Grajeda was one of them. Wino was licking their boots like crazy, right? And he glommed onto them. And they had a couple brothers like Bessie Sagato, Wino, and everybody else. That was like their core group. It was Raymond Bevito Alvarez. Then it was Kilroy Roybal. And then it was Bessie Sagato. Then Chino from Garrity was one of them. And they were like a core little group. And Wino from Arana, they were like a core little group. And I remember one of the most satisfying times of my career as a mobster, if you can call it that, right? Because people call it careers, was the time that it was decided that Bevito, Raymond Bevito Alvarez, and Kilroy were on the list for all the politicking and dissension they created in the organization. I had returned to prison. I was in Chino, California, and I was there with Tupi, and we subpoenaed Raymond Bevito Alvarez to Chino, California to eliminate him. He got there, and you could tell his eyes were big, and he was saying, "I didn't even know I was coming to court, bro." And he was talking to me like kindly and like he was my brother. While all this time, he alienated me in Folsom. Wedo Shai told me that he said F boxer, right, when I got locked in the hole. And I just heard all this stuff about him. So when his number came up, I jumped at it. I told Bessie, have him subpoenaed down here. And me and Tupi and Bessie were there at Palm Hall. And we had this plan to take him out to court and whack him on the bus. That's a whole story. I'm going to tell that whole story in an episode. But he knew it was coming. He knew it was coming. In fact, he PC'd up right there. We didn't get the chance to get him. We had two major attempts, one on the bus and one on the yard. And we're waiting on the yard with knives out. We're waiting for him to walk through that gate. He doesn't come through the gate. And it was one of the most satisfying moments of my career. I brought down a Titan, and I didn't even have to fire a shot. So that's him. We're going to do an episode on that guy because he was a turd. The next one is Raymond Ponchi Amado. I never met this guy, never knew who he was. I don't know if he's deceased or if he's living. And the next individual is Steve Calote Amador. I heard a lot about this guy. All the Carnales used to talk about Calote. And he looks like a friendly guy, doesn't he? He's got a great smile. He doesn't look like he's angry, but I never met him. The next guy is Manuel Chapo Amaro, and I never met that guy. Keep in mind that all these guys are made Mexican Mafia members. These are not supposition or validation based on a point system. These are made guys. Everybody we're showing here was a made guy. The next guy is Raymond Ray Aragon. Never met this guy. This is before my time, folks. And you can tell by the quality of the pictures because no pictures exist of these guys. Not in my possession and not in Mundo's possession because Mundo provided me with some of these black and whites. Some of them are mine, and they're old. This is back at the time of photography, and San Quentin and Folsom wasn't up to its best, right? The next guy is Louis Arraco. Louis Arraco is one of the heroin connections. There was Louis and his brother who became heroin connections for the organization. I believe that Mundo talks about these individuals extensively in numerous episodes on his channel. And that ends the second row. And on the third row, we're going to begin the third row. This is Juan Chinaboy Arias. I knew who he was. I knew his wife, Nilsa. I think she goes by Nilsa Davila now, and God bless her. I heard she's a believer. She goes to church, but she still maintains communication with some of the senoras, right? Well, Juan Chinaboy Arias was my homeboy from Artesia, right? He worked out in Chivas. That's where he's from. And he was eliminated in federal prison. Another carnal psycho from Pasadena ended up eliminating him in the cell when he became paranoid. And I had dealings with China Boy. It was actually his wife, Nilsa, that was obstructing myself and Daryl Baca from functioning in Artesia. She made it difficult for us. Like, she would have people oppose what we did, tell us we weren't welcome. And it kind of blew my hair back that he would allow his wife to do that, to talk to us that way. But he was a make carnal. Peewee and Smilon sponsored him, and he got into a gunfight with the guys from Big Hazard when the guys from Big Hazard were on the hit list. So he was eliminated. He didn't have it coming. He wasn't on the lista. He was a really quiet guy. We've showed multiple videos where China Boy is just sitting there in the hotel room, not saying a word. In fact, in one instance, there's a beef between him and Negro, Sammy Villalba, Mexican Mafia member, over territorial control of Artesia, Lakewood, Chivas, all those areas. And it got pretty heated because Smilon started throwing out accusations that Negro sent people down to China Boy's house with guns. Remember that instance where they meet specifically to hash this out. And Shia's pretty livid that somebody would make the accusation against Sammy, which is a killing offense, right? And that's China Boy. China Boy was eliminated some years back unjustly. Not that there's a just way to eliminate somebody, but in the eyes of the organization, he didn't have it coming. Immediately after his death, Psycho locked up. He locked up. He went PC and got himself an additional 20 years for that. Didn't even get a life sentence. He just got a 20-year sentence for it. The next guy is Joel Colorado Arias. I remember this guy. This is the guy who set up Spider Arriaga. Spider Arriaga was a Maravilla, a Mexican Mafia member. And I met Spider, but I met this guy, Joel, in Pelican Bay State Prison. And he had already been whacked. Chuco Castro from BNE had whacked him on the yard in Palm Hall because he went out there after the death of Spider from Maravilla. And everybody knew that he set up Spider. And I saw him in Pelican Bay. Me and Mo get to Pelican Bay from Tehachapi. We transfer from Tehachapi and we go into his pod. And his cell is adjacent to us. He's right next door to us. And Mo would talk in the vent to camaradas. And Joe Colorado would bang on the vent anytime Mo would talk. And one day I came out and I looked at him. He's in the back, way in the back of the cell. I tell him, come here, Colorado. He knew who I was because he was in the county jail with us before that. He made a brief pass through. In fact, I only saw him once in the county jail. Didn't speak to him or anything. He was there. He was there in this case with Spider Arriaga. I think it was something to do with that, but he just passed through. But I had the chance to talk to him in Pelican Bay in the pod. When I came out for a shower, I stopped by the front of his cell and I said, "Come here." And he wouldn't come to the front of the cell. He looked at me like really wary, like he knew something was up. And I told him, "Check it out, Colorado. Stop the bullshit. You're acting like a J-cat." And he said, "Well, that guy's making noise." I said, "You're making noise. The guy's talking in the vent. That's it." And Colorado didn't like it when people talked in the vent. But he didn't run anything there. He wasn't a carnal anymore. Technically he was, but he was already on the hit list. He had already been hit by Chuco, and it was open season. And we told all the camaradas there, if the doors open up, just run in there and make sure you eliminate him. Be careful who he is because he's not a punk, right? And then he continued it. He continued the JCAT behavior in Pelican Bay State Prison until Black Dan Barela got there. Black Dan Barela got in the pod with us. He ended up landing right in our pod. And we love Black Dan. I love Black Dan. He was a good friend of mine. And we told Black Dan what was going on. And Black Dan was a diplomat, if anything. He went and talked to Colorado, and Colorado stopped. He stopped. I guess he thought we were young punks, right? But we were carnales. And I told him, the guy that you're doing that to, every time he speaks to camaradas in the vent, he's a carnal. I says, and I'm a carnal. And he was just J-catting on us, but Black Dan got him to stop. The next guy in this third row is Daniel Spider Arriaga. This is the very individual that the previous guy set up to be killed. At a meeting, at a house, he was shot to death. I met him one time in Chino Palm Hall. Really cool dude, laid back, charismatic dude. He's another Maravilla guy. And unfortunately he was set up by Joe Colorado Arias and is no longer among the breathing. The next guy is old Ronald Ayala, Ronnie, godfather of San Diego. Everybody knows this guy. He just gained this prominence. I don't know how. I just think because he's an elder statesman and he just assumed the mantle of leadership. Well-respected carnal. I met him in the Los Angeles County Jail. He got subpoenaed down there. And he just networked from death row with all the death row brothers because it's a different type of clique at death row. It was a different thing. It was like there was like 5 carnales there, and they were a different beast. Like it was an entity unto its own. All part of the mother organization, the mother entity, but they created this air of mystique about them, which really worked. It really worked. And they had camaradas in line. They took care of business. Ronnie is well respected. In fact, he just got indicted. He's out of state right now, fighting a RICO indictment. I think he's going to get buried up there at ADX in Colorado, if that's possible, because even a federal sentence does not supersede his death sentence. And even though those have been suspended in California and there's a moratorium on implementation of capital punishment and death row's been dismantled, it's going to kick off at some point. At some point, we're going to get a governor in California that is all about the administration of justice by the courts, and there will be some executions at some point in the future. I think that their appeals are exhausted, and they're just waiting their time. I'm uncertain about that. I haven't read their case. I haven't went into Nexus Lexus and checked out their case, because that's not my forte. That's somebody else's job. I just know who he is. The next guy is Daryl Night Owl Baca. This individual was a good friend of mine. That's an old picture, because Daryl does not look the same anymore. And he's bald. He is bald now. He was going bald back when we were selling. And I think that was his biggest vanity, his hair. Like when I would cut his hair, he would not want me to cut around certain areas, right? And if I did, he would just stop. Like, no. He would not want me to cut around his bald spot. It's funny, bro. It was funny. And he was trying to protect that little patchy head right there so vigorously. But yeah, he was my buddy. We ended up having beef. We were Sallies for like 5 years and knew him from the streets, knew him from the hood. We grew up in the same hood. We're in the county jail together. We're in Tracy together. We ended up in Pelican Bay together. We're also in San Quentin together. We were young bucks. Daryl Bach is now currently housed in Pelican Bay State Prison. He's up for parole, I think, in 2027. And I seriously doubt that he's got a crack at it. I seriously doubt it. I know that for him, 1030s are pouring in from throughout California Department of Corrections because he is an active Mexican Mafia member. And I will let you know on each of these pictures that we're talking about, each of these individuals, whether they're active, deceased, or dropouts, right? And Daryl is active, as have all these individuals I've mentioned, with the exception of Raymond, Bevito, Alvarez, had dropped out, all these guys. So I'm going to identify them as we go along. The next guy is Marcelo Gabi Baeza. Did not know him. I did not know him. I believe he's deceased as well. I don't even know the hood he was from. So some of these guys I didn't know at all. And I'm going to be straight up about that. I'm not going to make up stuff and pull stuff out of thin air like other content creators do. The next guy is Ronald Turtle Bison. In fact, he just passed away from natural causes, I think earlier this year or late last year. And he was from Ontario. In fact, he was with us with Tupi, me, and Bessie in Palm Hall when we were going to whack out Bebito Alvarez. I remember this distinctly, that he was there and he was not going to participate in the hit because he was short to the house. He was doing a parole violation. I think it was 30 days out to parole. But here's the thing is I was like 60 days to parole and I was still willing to participate. I remember that Turtle was not going to participate because he was 30 days to the house. But yet I was going to participate and I was 60 days to the house. And Bessie was doing a violation too and he was short to the house. We're all doing parole violations. When you did a parole violation, you went to Chino Palm Hall. You went to Chino. That was Reception Center Central. That's what it was called. And we're there in Palm Hall. We all got slammed because we had indeterminate shoes. And he begged off of the hit. He begged off of the hit. He wasn't going to handle knives. He wasn't going to do anything. He was just going to watch. But I was okay with that. I was okay with that. And didn't see it for what it really was at the time. Because I could have easily said, well, I'm a short timer too. And I'm doing it. So why isn't he doing it? And I'm doing it. So why isn't he doing it, you know? But he passed away. May he rest in peace and condolences to his family. The next guy, Roy Sonny B. Ballesteros. I remember this guy. I saw him in Folsom State Prison. He was being escorted across the yard to 4A. And I remember the Carnales talking about him at that time. Oh, that's Sonny B, that's Sonny B. And then I heard some undergrumblings like he's on the lista, but I could never discern why. I later found out that when he was being escorted across the yard, he had already locked up. He had already left the organization. Everybody thought he was still good, but at that time he was going to go in the debriefing process, and that's what it is. The next guy is Armando Mando Barajas. This guy is from Ontario, but there's a lot of controversy that swirls around the guy. I met him, I think it was in Palmas or Pelican Bay. Some people say he's on the lista. I've heard some rumors that he's been attacked by camaradas. He is on the lista. I think it's just a matter of him getting around the right people at the right time before he's eliminated. There's a couple of instances where he got tweaked out on meth. And one, he tried to hang himself. Another, he tried to slice himself up with razors. I don't know the veracity of those incidents. I don't know the details of them. I just know that one of them was in Palm Hall and in fact did occur, and all the Carnales said he was a coward for trying to kill himself, and that's just stuck on him forever. He's never going to get rid of that. Yeah, he's on the bad news list. Some people say no, it's been cleaned up, but believe me, get around the right Carnales and he will be eliminated. They'll clean house. When they clean house, that means anybody with anything questionable is going to get nailed. Because that's when politics are flying, when they clean house. My buddy Black Dan Barela. Black Dan Barela is a carnal who was fundamental in the foundation in this process called spreading the EME gospel. According to Mando, there was a group of carnales that went around spreading the EME gospel, which meant eliminating people on the streets and in prison. And Black Dan was part of that. Black Dan was a good friend of mine. He's my co-sponsor. In fact, it was him that schooled me. This was at a time in Folsom State Prison that the cops would let you go into people's cells. They would just open up your door. Hey, can I go over and talk to this guy? And they would open your door and let you go down there. And you could hang out in the cell for a couple hours and chill and drink coffee and smoke cigarettes. And Black Dan would cut my hair. And during this process, he started educating me about the Mexican Mafia. He started grooming me. And it was then that I knew I was getting in. I knew I was getting in. But Black Dan was a good friend of mine. And he was one of those brothers that made you feel so loved. Like he felt like your brother. And you get around other members and you didn't feel anything like that. You didn't feel the camaraderie and the bond, right? Like with Weather Shy and Black Dan and a couple other brothers, I felt that complete acceptance. Like you could do no wrong. You could do no wrong and they would die for you. And these were the kind of brothers they were. That's when I got in. That's how I felt. I don't know about other cardenales or other people's experiences, but with Black Dan, he was special. He was just something different, you know. The only guy I could compare him to is Widow Shoyak. That's the kind of love I had for those guys. And I know it's crazy because those are the same guys that want to eliminate me, but you don't get rid of that. Somewhere deep in me, there's still that affinity for them. And I have it for very few members that currently exist. But there are some that I pray for them. You know, like I pray for Daryl, pray for Widow Shy. Not just because they're my homeboys. There was this bond that existed. Once you live with somebody and once you bond with them, Even if that bond dissolves, right? There's still that guy was my brother, you know. And as bad as it is, and as horrible it is that we're no longer friends, you still love them. You don't wish them ill, and that's how I felt about Dan. You know, he went on to federal prison. He was indicted in the United States of America versus Peewee Aguirre, that first RICO indictment that I always speak of, where the FBI indicted the Mexican Mafia using the RICO statute. He went and got sentenced to life in prison. He ended up dying in Victorville State Prison, heroin overdose. Some people say heroin overdose, some people say heart attack. But he passed away, and they had a memorial for him. They had a memorial for Black Dan in the prison where all the Sureños lined up and took pictures of themselves holding signs in memory of Black Dan. Condolences to his family members and his remaining relatives who mourn his death. As always, hype the video, hype, hype, hype. Leave a comment, thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Peace out.